Hello and welcome to Chapter 7, Testing and Experimenting New Ideas from the Entrepreneurship textbook, The Practice and Mindset, second edition. So in this one, this chapter, we are expanding into testing and experimenting your ideas or your business idea, right? I think one of the challenges that happens with in startups or entrepreneurship startups is that a lot of times individuals or companies or people do not go out and test their or experiment their service or product. I recall the story, I think I mentioned in one of the chapters. Years ago, I was asked by an entrepreneurship professor, business professor, to come and listen to these students who were going to go into a pitch competition on this wheelchair product that had these wheels that could be in terrains, right, in third world countries. That was explained to me. And so he wanted me to come and hear these students give their pitch. And it was a pretty good pitch. It was all right. But the main crux of it was one of the questions I asked was, have any of you actually tested it out? Have any of you been in a wheelchair and tested it out? They all looked at me like what just happened, right? And the point of they, of course, none of them had been in a wheelchair and none of them really tested it out to see if it would work. I mean, you can sit on it, but if you've never used a wheelchair in your life, how do you know it's a good product? So they had to go at the last minute. They found somebody who's in a wheelchair and they tested it out and gave some feedback. By that time, it was too late. I mean, you got the competition at the end of the weekend. This is the beginning of the week. You should have thought about this a long time ago. The point of the moral of the story is, right, when you're doing testing and experiment on your product, you got to do it at the very beginning, and you got to do it with people, individuals who are actually going to use this product or service, right? What's the point of a product or service if nobody that's in your company, or even you've never actually done the experiment of it or testing it to see if it actually works, right? It's like designing a car and no one's ever drove, right? What's the point of the group? What's the point of the experiment group if no one's ever driven a car? So in the experiments, what are they and why do them, right? It's the implementation phase. It's early, fast, low cost testing experiment, right? And it involves trying something new. Now, of course, you don't have to go out and spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars if you don't have the resources, but you do want to go out and test and see at the implementation phase that it's going to work. One of my experiences with this was a long time ago. I started this YouTube channel called OYE Help Me, OYE Help Me, and one of the products that I wanted to sell was these T-shirts. And so I went out and bought a few T-shirts, like I think 20 or 30 T-shirts or something like that, and I tried to sell them. And I only sold like 3 or 4 shirts. I had to give the rest away because it was just sitting there. Nobody really wanted to buy them. But I experimented. It cost me a few dollars, but it was good that I experimented at the very beginning to see what would be people's opinions. Of course, people's opinions, but they're not going to buy the shirt. And the experimentation test to help learn about the feasibility and viability of this product or service. Entrepreneurs have many different types of experiments available. Again, there are many ways you can experiment with the product or service. For example, I just gave you the wheelchair example. You could have somebody who's actually been in a wheelchair or is in a wheelchair and actually go and ask them to experiment and sit on it, right? Go buy them dinner or something afterwards. One of the ways, of course, is interviewing as well. You can interview a group of people. Hey, can I get your time? I just have a few questions to ask you. And if you're gonna if someone's gonna interview, make sure it's someone who's very friendly, has a friendly face and a friendly voice. Because it's very hard to get people to interview them. So you're gonna have to do your due diligence. So if you're gonna interview, right, there are inexpensive ways to do it. So just ask 5 quick questions. Paper testing, right? Again, storyboarding testing it out by storyboarding or drawing your product you envision. Wireframe is another one. It's a blueprint, right? There are several websites online you can subscribe to a website to do a wireframe. Also storyboarding as well. Advertising, right? Spread the word out and see what happens to target market. Button to nowhere, use to test if your customers will click on a button. So you can see the click or the usage to see if people will do it. Another one's a landing page. Include a particular call to action, like click here for more information. Task completion or usability testing, watching someone using your product to see if it works. Again, kind of the usability testing, talking about what I mentioned about the wheelchair. Prototype, again, you can do a prototype to see if it works. Maybe do 50 or 100, see if it actually works. The prototype version can really help you to determine what needs to be fixed and what needs to do better. Pre-selling, another one that some people do is pre-selling. Like, you've probably been involved with it, you've probably seen beforehand, pre-sale on my book will be out in 6 weeks, and you can see how many people actually want your product or your service. The tricky part with pre-selling is that you're actually going to have to, if people are paying for this pre-selling of a book, make sure you actually do go and do it, right? Don't just take people's money. Concierge and Wizard of Oz. Concierge is the customer's interface with the product technology behind the scenes. So that's kind of a testing technique. The concierge is, you're basically doing the concierge is getting their interfaces with the product. So going behind the scenes on that. Live products of business, post the test carried out. Of course, continuing to post tests to see if your product is viable. Prototypes can come in basic models, again, ideas, sketches. Different types of prototypes. We have the rapid prototypes, the mock-up prototypes, high fidelity prototype, and the Lego prototype. So those are various techniques as to looking into these types of prototypes. So let's take a deeper dive into these prototypes, right? Again, the role playing, the Wizard of Oz prototype, user driven, pilots, and storyboards. So going back to these different types, right? You have the MVP, right? MVP is a prototype. Of course, the first functional and working version of the product. Rapid prototypes, quickly created models used to visualize the product or service. The mock-up, right, usually presented in a 2D or 3D model that looks like the finished product but actually lacks the right functionality. It's just like, look at this product, is it going to work, right? High fidelity is a more sophisticated mock-up, allows the users to actually interact with the product or service. Lego prototype, usually creating through a simple prototype, like with Legos, sort of, in a way, right? Role playing, I think, is another one, kind of seeing from the user's perspective. Again, user driven, right? Focuses on creating the prototype, which in turn enables you to understand their thinking, right? So again, your user, of course, doing pilots and prototypes, right? Doing the prototype, and the storyboards are easy to prototype, right? You just draw out the sketch to see if it's going to work. The power of storyboarding, and you probably, if you're a big comic fan, right? Sometimes, of course, they do it during comics and sketches and video production, right? They draw out where the scenes of how it's going to, how they envision the scene working out before they actually do the final product. And storyboarding has a very powerful tool. It's arranged in sequences of the drawings, right? To generate ideas and questions, right? What's the problem? What's the solution? How will the customer benefit? And I think, storyboarding is very helpful to see how this product or service is going to help somebody instead of spending millions of dollars on a product and not working. I remember also another, years ago, I was part of this golf class on the weekends when I was a graduate student at Oklahoma State. And I remember one of the golf instructors said, he created he created this tool, not this tool to use when you're golfing. It was like a practice tool or something like that. But it would go on your leg, on your knee, to help you bend in the correct stance when you're taking your golf swing. He said that the problem was he didn't do his homework. He created this product thinking himself it was going to sell a lot and it was going to help golfers. Problem was no golfers in the US really wanted this product. So he had like a bunch of product left. He said, I think he said in Asia or something, I think Japan or something like that was the only place they really wanted it. But again, he didn't prototype, he didn't do a storyboarding, he didn't do any type of experimentation to see if people will actually like it. He just thought about it because he was a golf instructor that people are going to buy it, and they really didn't. Again, sometimes the back of a napkin, right? Sometimes some of the greatest businesses start in the back of a napkin. Sketches on the page. Again, that's how you can do a prototype. Hypothesis testing and scientific method, right? If you remember back to scientific method, matching the result of tests to the original hypothesis. So what's your hypothesis? Again, experiments can involve observation of students studying in the library, employees working in group projects, consumers visiting a store. You yourself can do these type of experiments of observing, right? You can go to the mall or store and just watch how consumers interact with a particular product or service. Now, don't go be a stalker or anything and watch them viciously, but you can take notes on that. The 6 steps of the scientific experiment in action, right? Ask a lot of questions, carrying out background research, right? Go do your research on it, developing a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis by running experiments, analyze the data, and assess the results. That's very important. Acting to learn, experiment quickly, right? So that means better chance of refining ideas into viable opportunities. Don't spend too much time. You don't have that much time, so be quick about it. A good experiment is well planned. Make sure you plan it out correctly. And again, it's designed to support or reject your hypothesis. Low-cost customer engagement involves customers in experiment to test hypothesis. Again, to see how it works out, generating data and rules of experimentation. Organizations rely on historical data to gauge customer tastes. Fear of failure tends to discourage entrepreneurs from experimenting, so you shouldn't have a fear of failure. Don't be discouraged. One of the main problems that I find into, teaching an entrepreneurship, like the 101, the startup class, is I tell students, like, listen, you have this idea for a business, right? For example, if they're writing a business plan or they're going to do this, like, don't be afraid to fail and go talk to people to see if your idea is going to work or not. Don't be afraid, because you rather fail at the beginning of the stages when there's really nothing there than have this idea that's going to work and then you go out to market and you miserably fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Like, I failed so many times, but I've learned from those failures. Like, when I started doing video production, recording these Oh Yeah Help Me videos, like, you can go watch them on YouTube. They're pretty terrible. Like, the first ones, they're just terrible production. But because I didn't have a fear of failure, I learned from those mistakes from that production, and of course, over the years, I've gotten better at it. Now, I'm not no Steven Spielberg, but you can see from my YouTube videos, I've gotten better over time. Because don't be afraid to experiment, and of course, I experiment with different things. See what's going to happen, see what's going to work. Generating data and the rules of experimentation, right? Today's entrepreneurs are required to experiment to prove a concept, and knowing data is detrimental, right? One of the things that you cannot do is you cannot ignore the data, right? You can't ignore that, right? Get feedback. I think that's the very important thing. To build a business, research the companies and experts and establish contacts. I think one of the biggest things you can do as an entrepreneur, someone who's want to launch a startup, is you have to research the companies and who are the experts in your field and learn from them and try to establish a contact. If not, learn from them to see how you can make a business. The case of curiosity, be curious. Always be curious. Uh, and of course, make sure to stay curious, connect with other curious people, be a curiosity ambassador, focus on learning. I think one of the big things that you always got to be learning, always learn, always learn, right? And of course, how to stay curious, right? Some of the tips is ask why, what if, and how might we. Um, Again, without risk, there's no rewards, right? You need to be always constantly curious. Be respectful, but be curious. So that is it. This is chapter 7, testing and experiments. Thank you.